Shabbat Shalom has, just contained the normal. It's always pleasure to be here. That's what I say whenever I'm standing here, but indeed it is a pleasure to be here and sharing the words of Adonai. It's Shabbat, Shoftim, Judges. It's once again we are sort of ramping up towards the Torah cycle, and we can see the high holidays speedily approaching, and has been a roller coaster, let's put it away. A brief summary of Parashat Shoftim. It starts with the Torah concepts of Judges, and it sort of lists how the society, or how society should be led, and also very, I would say, ancient, but at the same time very modern. The structure of justice system. We look around the world, we see how the justice system works, but it's not a modern concept. It's been there since the first century. And that's what Moshe has spelled out as there will be officers, judges in every city. And as he moving along on this parasha, he highlights how the judges should behave or perform their tasks. They should be fair and unbiased. He also goes on and explains the special process that should be followed if someone was accused of idolatry. And also a system in place to deal with difficult cases. Just like the modern justice system, you have the higher court, you have Supreme Court, and so on. This has been there since the first century. And he also highlights the main types of leader the Israelites should have. There will be kings and priests and prophets among the Israelites. And as we're moving on, there's some warning that comes with it to avoid magic, witchcrafts, and false prophets. Lying witnesses who testify falsely are to be punished. And then a concept that we will talk a little bit more about is a warning about warning the kings not to acquire grand numbers of horses for himself, and not to take too many wives and accumulate a large amount of silver and gold. And on top of that, they have to have not one but two Torah, and write one of them and read every day of their lives. And not to consider the fact of being king being better or superior than his brothers. I mean, Moshe literally spells out all the danger of having a king. There will be risks that the king will exploit his powers, using it to accumulate more horses and wives and wealth. And this is very much the king's. This is not a new concept, because when we looked at the first century, the ancient world, all the emperors, you look at Egypt, you have Pharaoh, all those vanity projects, we see the pyramids, the statues, and. I mean, this is what kings used to do, and that was the concept was very, very much clear in Judaism. We should not follow that path. And even into today's days, when we talk about king, we talk about presidents, we talk about ministers. That is literally the human tendency to do. You are in position of power. What you tend to do, you accumulate wealth to yourselves. And with that comes that divides. Because you are king or you are priest or wherever you are, the human tendency is to feel you are better than the masses. And that what comes with it is the fact that the mentality changed. Humility, that's not apply for kings. That not applies for the people in power. That is only for peasants, those who had been born not to rule but to be ruled. Now, that concept in the first century that the king should be humble was clearly not, let's say, fit for purpose in the view of any other civilization. I mean, let's just stop for a second and go to Pharaoh. You need to humble. You need to be humble. You need to give away all this wealth you have. I mean, clearly, it just wouldn't work. But that's the concept, a very clear put in place for the Jewish people. Being on the top doesn't mean to be ruling and loads people with rules and regulations that does not apply to the people on the top. But this man's mindset hasn't changed. It has been so dragged through from the first centuries and has not changed, because even today we look around the world, it's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Countries after country, four corners in the world, completely full of corruption, top to bottom. It's the people on the top literally amassing wealth, and not just that, abusing their position of authority, exploiting the power, creating rules and regulations that doesn't seem to apply to them. We've seen this day in, day out. I mean, if we go back to the parasha and we read verses 16 and 19, that says, "You are not to distort justice or show favoritism, and you are not to accept a bribe, for a gift blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of even the upright." I mean, the concept that, if we read it to the current, let's say, people in position, whether governors and so on, the twist will be like, let's say that the interpretation that will fit in on these modern worlds, distort the justice, if you're powerful or if you have a good lawyers, if you're in high position, you'll be shown favoritism anyway, so don't worry about that. Yeah, accept bribe, just make sure you don't get caught. You can always pay compensation, and just impose them with a not disclose agreement, and you'll be fine. Completely the opposite. Completely the opposite. And this is the warning that Moshe has mentioned time and time again to the Israelites. The human tendency is to be corrupted with all these things, the world things. That is the normal, that's the human tendency. And when you're in position of power and move far away from God, that just becomes the normal. But the Torah concept of leadership is unique amongst the nation and has always been. Because in the eyes of the Torah, a king or leader should serve his people, should be a God-fearing, serving his people, not other way around. Also be someone that encourages his people to fulfill that call. And this is one of the concepts Yeshua has showed us perfectly. That servant leadership, that king, the how a king should be. That that's the perfect model he showed us. I mean, if we read Matthew 20, 25, and 28, there's a very clear example of a kingship in ancient times, and if applied on modern days, clearly the world would be a much better place. 25 states, "But Yeshua called them and said, you know that among the Goyim, those who are supposed to rule them become tyrants, and and their superiors become dictators. Among you, it must not be like that. On the contrary, whoever among you wants to be a leader must become a servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Whoever amongst you wants to be first needs to be a servant. Whoever wants to be a leader must be a servant. This is the Torah view of leadership, kingship. And again, this is a very clear example that's how faith and believing in God makes a difference. The way we think, the way we act, and the way we feel. Because in order to make this perfect example that Yeshua states there, it ought to be more than just a human-centered life. It needs to be God in the middle of all this. Because take that aside, it just simply doesn't work. Because our tendency is, we turn left when God is on the right. And believing believing that there is a God in whose presence we stand means that we are not the center of our world, but God is. And it is very difficult for us human beings to humble and give the authority or power to God. It is hard because we want to be in control. That's what human beings like to be. We want to have that remote control to turn off and on whenever we want. But humble and place God in the center of our lives means that we are secure enough not to need that constant reassurance, that need to be in control at all times, because God is in control, and clearly He can do better things, make better choice than we can. This also means that you don't need to feel to have to prove yourself by showing how clever or how stellar or how smart or gifted you are, because that becomes irrelevant, because you're not centered on those things. You're way away there because God is dealing with it. You have that sense of security, inner peace, because you live in God's love. And you have the faith in God even when our faith is rock bottom. And instead of we competing who is tallest, who is fastest, who is gifted, competing with each other, we merge and we work as one, and we strengthen those bonds. And by doing that, we just don't see, wherever we go, we have that clear distinction that people are what they are. We don't need to compete with each other. And we don't see people as let's say, mirrors, that wherever we look, all we see is a reflection of us. Oh, look at me, look at me. And that is what simply vanished completely. And when we bring that humility, that inner humility from us, make us understanding that it's not all about you, it's not all about me. But on the opposite direction, that's where the world is leading to, because humble people, that humility is becoming a very rare currency. And also to say that there are lots of things that is definitely make this process speeding up. the current social instability, and aggravated by the social media, that lack of family togetherness, divided communities, and the lack of faith, which has left us, let that insecurity infestates throughout our lives, which is also is depriving with those conventional supports, those traditional supports that helps to understand and to sort of being shaped into God's path. We live in a world that it doesn't, no one, it's confusing, it's all blur, that no one knows anymore the difference between lie and the truth. What is lie, what is true? Yes means no, and no means yes. And they just become interchangeable. It's, my yes means yes because today it's convenient for me to, my yes, means yes. But actually, when it's inconvenient, I say yes, but actually I change my mind. It's no now. But that is where the world is at moments. But this is very, again, as I mentioned earlier, very, the opposite direction. What Yeshua has been teaching. Let your yes be yes, and let your no be no. That is a very good starting point. Rather than what we see these days, people living their lives through that, that social media, that constant need of reassurance, just another post, just another, how many likes do you receive today? That constant injection of self-esteem and striving to be right all the time, even when we're wrong. We will find ways to bend to the truth so that we are always right, that 100% score. We're never wrong. Because this is, that pride that comes through and becomes the center of our small universe, which is full it with me. It's all about me. It's I, me again, and me, and I, me. And removing the space for that humbleness, that humility, and the existence of others, because it's all about me. It's just it's me. The rest doesn't exist. I look at everyone else. You look at everyone else, all you see is your reflection. Oh, can you see me? I'm definitely a bit taller than you. Oh, I'm actually a bit faster than you. But it's that reflection you see in others. And this is clearly the opposite direction of what Moshe was telling in his parasha. Because once we reset that path and we bring in that humility, that inner self, trust in the Lord, things change, because it's that faith, that the let go, that will bring that just and peaceful society. It's hard to let go, but it's a let go that keep you stand still and far from the Lord. It's that pride. We want to have all remote controls. We want to stop, pause, move forward, go back a little bit. Oh, actually, I want to go forward. It's that pride that we need to let go, which is hard to let go. Because when you talk about pride, we talk about that self-centered lifestyle or mindset. It's all about who is right, and it's always me. I'm always right. I don't want to be wrong. But when we look at, when you look on the other hand, look at humility, which is all about what is right. What is the right thing to do? And to serve God in love is to do what is really, truly right. Because it's truly right and for no other reason. It's the right thing to do. That is our call, to worship God. Because it's the right thing, and that's not the reason. That is the reason. It's the right thing to do. Because loving God and loving itself, Love is selfless. Forgiveness is selfless. And it's all part of that letting go. You let things go. You, as we read today, you love your enemy. It's selfless. You forgive. When we place that self-centered mindset on our universe, we eventually, what we end up doing is everything we're trying to do is to meet our means. It's literally to our benefit. We don't see anything else. So that, well, everything you do, the end is always, oh, I know, this is the path we'll take, but at the end, it's me there. Humble is about living by the light that is greater than me. When God is at the center of our lives, we open ourselves up to the glory of creation and the beauty of other people. The smaller the self, the wider reach of our worlds and closer to Adonai we can become. But when your self is bigger, then your reach becomes smaller, and clearly you distance yourself from Adonai. Looking through the parasha, we talk about justice. That's the sort of justice, and justice. Two things are going in parallel, and there is a great parallel of this parasha and the current world leaders or governments and authority in the world, but the Torah takes of it is very, very different. Moshe clearly explained, whoever leads people needs to live in accordance with the laws and fulfill the needs of the people who's being led. And Moshe's perception or view of those in authority or in position of power is very, very different to what we see day in, day out in governments across the world. Because authority, the way we look at it, I'll say the common understanding is all about power. You have authority, you have power. But Moshe is more about having authority is that self-restraint. That is all about the voice of God within. Because your authority is not about bossing people around, but you hear what God has to say, you follow what God is leading you to do and how to lead your people. It's about the ability for leaders to hear the words. It's not about power and make people have that fear of governments or authorities. It's all about the fear of God. Because if you fear God, there's nothing to fear about regulation of governments, because God clearly states you follow the leaders, you obey the leaders. It's not your pride that will collide with rules or regulation that have been put in place. That becomes a not existential, because there's not that collision the two. And on that, what we exert is to pray for those in authority. And I believe we mainly in the current world where we look around what we see, there's definitely a need for it, because governments when you look at, and I mean any country, we look in the UK, we look at America, Israel, what is currently going, it just feels like all governments they lost their plots. And more than ever that we need to pray for those in leadership positions, those the leaders in authority, for God to give them the wisdom, the justice, and the rationalness. Because those in power, they make decisions, and the wrong decision they make is the innocent people that suffers. And this is not new. We go back to Egypt to look at the decision the Pharaoh has made when he was asked to let the Israelites go. His decision was, no, I will not do it. And the consequence was not just for him, but every single innocent Egyptian. And that is the same thing we see now. It's one person that makes the wrong decision, and the whole country, world suffers. And just sort of moving on in that link, we know the current situation and wars and conflicts and so on. But one of the things that it is reassuring that things will get better. When we read the prophet Isaiah, chapter 11, verse 6 to 9, it just gives that perfect vision of world at peace. And when I read through it just kind of captured that I found it, it links, because what the whole, as human beings, there's things that we strive, is peace. It's that justice that, come together. If you live in a peaceful world, and world that is, the justice flows like water, there's nothing to worry about. And that vision, I'll just read start with verse 6. The wolf will live with the lamb, and the leopard lay down with the kids. Calf, young, and lion, and fattened lamb together with a little child to lead them. Cow and bear will feed together, their young will lay down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. An infant will play on cobra's hole, a toddler put his hand in a viper's nest. They will not hurt or destroy anywhere on my holy mountain, for the earth will be as full of knowledge of Adonai as water covering the sea. I just kind of, have that picture on my mind, all those, animals I just mentioned that, currently the two, they don't go together. You will never have a lion and a lamb. That is just not feasible. But it's kind of, that vision of things ahead to come. And this is just one thing. And it is reassuring. It is reassuring. To conclude, I'll leave you with a quote that I read through, and I just found it somehow connects with the parasha and reality that we are currently living. It states, the true peace is not merely the absence of tension. It's the presence of justice. Throughout the history, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, the silence of the voice of justice when it mattered most. That has made it possible for evil to triumph. Shabbat Shalom.